The unknown is a scary place. You step out into the unknown, you're going to be unprepared for that trauma. You don't know how it's going to happen. And so the person keeps clinging to the known. But when the person finally overcomes the emotion, the body literally is.
Hello, and welcome to the Pacific Channel, where we talk about the law of attraction, how to manifest anything you want, meditation, and more. I'm your host, Steve Doherty, and today we're going to be talking about another Dr. Joe Dispenza audio clip where he's being interviewed by a host who asked him how quickly should it take for a person to start to see any improvements whenever they start to meditate. Because the point was brought up that they can't expect someone who's had a lot of trauma in their past, for example, who's had it for a couple years, you can't expect them to get over it in just a couple meditations. So that is discussed. And then also another interesting question that is brought up about trauma and by the host. And Dr. Joe basically says that he's in the middle of the road on this, because the question is, should you go back in a person's past and look at and discuss and rehash all of the different traumas that they had in order to help them to try to heal from it? And based upon the law of attraction, that's kind of a bad idea. If you're going to go into your past and discuss it, you're going to actually recreate those feelings, those thoughts, those feelings. And if you don't do anything about it, you're going to attract more of that kind of thing into your life. But Dr. Joe says that he's in the middle of the road when it comes to this, because he does understand that there are things like EFT, which I've talked about before, emotional freedom techniques, which basically allows you to go back into somebody's past or history who has had trauma and remove the emotional intensity behind any negative feeling or thought that they have about a certain event, to the point where it feels like it's someone else's story if you start to retell your old story. So Dr. Joe basically calls that wisdom. If you can talk about your past trauma without any emotional intensity, that's called wisdom. But let's listen to Dr. Joe explain all of this now.
You know, one of the core ideas I get from your work is that we all have a choice. We can choose and practice the way that we want to feel so that we actually start feeling it every day. You mentioned victim mindset a little bit already, and I want to talk a little bit about that shortly, because I think many people will say, I'm the way I am because of this. And we'll get to that in just a second. Before we move to that, for someone who is watching this or listening and is intrigued, and they go, okay, I understand, I've got a choice, I can practice feeling an elevated emotion. They also hear you saying that this can take time. If you spent 10 years in stress, it ain't going to happen overnight.
And sometimes it does, though.
But sometimes it can do. How quickly might someone, if they wake up and they don't reach for the phone and don't put the news on and they decide to engage in a meditation, maybe with a pre-meditation ritual like you do, how quickly might someone start to feel a difference? 1 day, 2 days? Or is it realistic that within 7 days, someone's going to start to feel quite differently?
Okay, let's talk about this, because I don't want to mislead anybody. Knowledge is the forerunner to experience. The more people understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how gets easier. And this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. The practical application in understanding that philosophy, that theory, that intellectual knowledge, that information, once you start to apply it and personalize it and demonstrate it, the more you can understand that, why you're doing it and what you're doing it, you get greater value out of it. So we have people that are diagnosed with serious health conditions, that are nurses, that are cancer researchers, that are physicians, that are engineers, or just a person who just really wants to understand the content. Now it's so much easier to forget this information than to remember it. It's just, I always laugh at myself because I have to go back and relearn it again. And I think I know it pretty well, and yet I forget. I don't know why, but it's just the way it is. So when our meditations get stale, it's because we forget what we're doing, right? So the person who really, really takes the time to study instead of watching Netflix, instead of scrolling through TikTok, instead of getting on their phone and doing mindless texts or whatever. They're going to set aside an hour a day and I'm going to learn this information. When they sit down to do the work, they're present.
Yeah.
They understand if they feel this emotion, that they're going to signal a new gene in a new way. If they feel the other emotion, they're going to down-regulate that gene and up-regulate the gene for their disease. So now it's an understanding.
Yeah.
If I rehearse how I'm going to be mentally, I'm going to install the hardware in my brain. If I keep doing this, it's going to become a software program. I'm going to start acting that way. Okay, if I say I can't, it's too hard, I'm too tired, I don't feel good, those are the things that stop me. Okay, but what if I just start saying anything is possible? I believe in synchronicities. What if I, with my intention and attention, just really get clear on that? Would that be the new voice in my head? So now, the person who's truly present and not thinking about their shower or the emails they have to do or their cell phone or their texts or when they have to take their kids to ballet or whatever, you're going to get to all of that. The person who's truly present, if they follow the instructions, we've seen them have very significant changes. First, in their subjective experience of themselves. Like, wow, my back pain isn't there. That's kind of weird. Or, God, I slept better last night. These small indicators or feedback to tell you that whatever you're doing inside of you is producing a result outside of you. Keep that up over a period of time, and you see instrumental changes taking place in the person. Now, another person who has had a series of traumas, been abused in some way from childhood, is facing a lot of health conditions, a lot of emotional and psychological conditions. We don't want them to heal in 1 week. We want them to work on overcoming those emotional states, and those are the victories. So sitting down in the meditation, and when their body starts getting agitated or starts getting anxious, instead of quitting and saying, I can't meditate, because that would be the extent of that person, just be curious. What's on the other side of this? Can I lower the volume to this emotion? My body's craving this emotion. Let me settle it down into the present moment. That would be a victory.
So that person with a lot of trauma, there's a moment in the meditation where they feel uncomfortable. The easy thing would be, hey, I'm going to stop. I'm going to put on Instagram. I'm going to get a coffee. I'm going to do anything else to distract me.
Right.
You're saying that's the key moment. You want to sit with that and hopefully break through that.
What I'm saying is there's no such thing as a bad meditation. There's only you overcoming you. People think I'm doing my meditation wrong. No, you're doing it right.
Even if it's difficult.
That is the moment that is going to define the person. So then the person goes, oh God, I feel really uncomfortable. I'm not a good meditator. There's something wrong with me. It's my trauma, it's my past, it's my parents, it's whatever. The person who says, no, I'm going to sit in the presence of this anxiety, and I'm going to keep working with my body, and I'm going to keep lowering the volume to that emotion. Now listen, you keep lowering the volume to that emotion, you're going to take your attention off that past problem, because you only put your attention on that past problem because of the emotion. I'll never tell anybody to go back and review their past. I'll say overcome the emotion. Overcome the emotion.
This is a key point, I think, which I really want to talk to you about today, Dr. Joe. Trauma, right? There's a lot of awareness growing now about trauma, the impact of our childhoods, how we're spoken to, the beliefs we take on as kids, how that impacts us as adults. Now, one approach to deal with trauma is to go there, to go and unpick it and uncover it and see a therapist and detail what happened, why it happened, get an understanding of why you're behaving a certain way as an adult. Now, I think for many people, I include myself in this, that can be incredibly powerful and incredibly important. But I also see, when I think of your work, I wouldn't say it's mutually exclusive necessarily, from the outside at least, but is there a danger that we can spend too long in our trauma, processing our trauma, trying to think about it? Because effectively, a key message from your work is don't get stuck in those emotions of the past. Don't let your past define you. Think about that vision of the future. Start to feel what you want to feel in the future so you can experience it right now. But can someone go back, revisit their trauma, try and process it, and Is that approach consistent with yours, or would you say it's a better approach, or a different approach is to not spend time there, just create the new reality?
Yeah, I think I'm down the middle on this, okay? I think there are many modalities that work for trauma. What I've discovered is that insight never really changes behavior. You can see that your father was overbearing or was an alcoholic, or you could see all these different things, like you could come up with the insight of all these different things. The problem that I see with people is then they tend to excuse their change by saying, oh, I had a rough childhood, that's why I am the way I am. They're excusing their present position. So, and again, trauma is a difficult thing, but for me, the person who's living by the identity in their life that they were traumatized as a child or whatever it is, or they've had a trauma in their life, I'm not saying forget the trauma and create another emotion. I'm saying that the person who's willing to go through the emotion and keep working on lowering the volume to it. We have had so many people in this work with brutal pasts, really, really difficult pasts, do the work, and finally they reach that point where they just break free from the emotion. They look back, and I have interviewed enough of them. It's the same thing. They look back at their entire past, and they don't want to change one thing in their past because it brought them to this elegant moment where they're liberated. They see their betrayers, they see their abusers, they have nothing but love for them. Now, the side effect of that, and many times they'll say, it was like my heart blew wide open. They had to pass through the valley of the shadow of darkness to get there. And they just thought, I don't know if I can go any further. And they went one more time. And the body literally was liberated from the past, right? Because the trauma is not just in the brain. The trauma is stored emotionally in the body. So you want to take the body out of the past, out of the known. What do you think the body's going to say if it's been conditioned to be the mind? The unknown is a scary place. You step out into the unknown, you're going to be unprepared for that trauma. You don't know how it's going to happen. And so the person keeps clinging to the known. But when the person finally overcomes the emotion, the body literally is freed from the chains of the past. The side effect of that is seeing the past from a greater level of consciousness. Lo and behold, there goes the suicidal tendencies, there goes the dysfunction, there goes the irritable bowel syndrome. That was because the body was still living in that past event by living by the same emotion. So the research on memory is kind of fascinating, and I've studied it enough. The way we recount the past is not the way it happened, even if you absolutely think you remember it being that way. So we don't have the same brain as we did when we were 8 years old or 12 years old or 20 years old. We have a different brain. We have a completely different brain. So the fabrication of the story for many people, they embellish the story and make it seem even worse than what it was. But what you're saying is, I changed in those moments, and from a biological standpoint, I haven't been able to change since. So let me tell you why it's been so hard for me to change. And the story becomes dramatized or embellished. And the person works fire themselves into this emotional froth, and then fires and wires the same circuits in the brain, and they're actually reaffirming their limitation. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I think we're just taking too long, right? So 50% of that story isn't even the truth. It means, in a sense, we're reliving a miserable life that we never even had, and we don't want. But the unknown, people would rather cling to their suffering. This is not a judgment. We all do this. We'd rather stay in the known than take a chance in the unknown, because those emotions of survival are saying what? Run from the unknown. The unknown is a scary place. So now the unknown, you got to come up against that moment where you're going to actually leave that behind and step into the unknown. This is not a intellectual process. This is David and Goliath. There's a battle going on where the body keeps wanting to go back to its familiar state because it's subconsciously been conditioned to be the mind, stay in the known. So then, if the person keeps revisiting the trauma from the past, I'm not certain enough that when they revisit the trauma from the past, unless they learn how to desensitize their emotional response to it, that it's going to work for them. What I learned is that if the person overcomes the emotion, the memory without the emotional charge is called wisdom. And now you no longer belong to the past. So the body gets frustrated in the meditation. Instead of taking your blindfolds off or turning the lights on and say, listen to the voice, I can't meditate, this is too much. The sincere person says, what's on the other side of I can't? What's on the other side of this emotion? Let me see if I can settle my body back down out of that emotion and recondition it to a new mind. And the act of doing that in the beginning is very tedious. And all of a sudden, the person starts getting better at it. And they're telling their body it's no longer the mind, that they're the mind. They're executing a will that's greater than that program. And just like training an animal, you stay, you're not going to die, I'm going to feed you, you can check your emails, you can check your texts, but this is my time right now. And you keep doing that with the body, keep settling it down to the present moment. It acquiesces. It surrenders to a new mind. And when that happens, we've seen this, we've measured it, there's a liberation of energy. We go from particle to wave, we go from matter to energy. That emotion is liberated from the body. And now there's energy to heal. There's energy to create a new life. It's available energy. It's free energy.
Yeah.
So the person goes, wow, I see it from a different level of consciousness. I have nothing but love. Or, my goodness, I'm no longer that person. And they're now free from the past. Now, the side effect of that is that there's a biological upgrade. There's a neurological upgrade. There's a chemical upgrade. There's a genetic modification that's taking place. Why? You think the same way, you make the same choices, you do the same things, you create the same experiences, you feel the same emotions. Your biology will stay the same because you're the same. Now the person's thinking differently, they're making different choices, they're doing different things, they're behaving in different ways, they're having new experiences, and they're certainly feeling different emotions. The body reorganizes to a new chemistry. And they'll tell you, I'm not that person any longer. I'm literally not that person. And they're betrayers, even if they're family members, they have forgiveness for them. And what is forgiveness? You take your attention off the emotion. You overcome the emotion. You don't pay attention to the person or the problem.
So, as Dr. Joe said, people basically become thankful for the trauma that they've had once they get to the point where they break through and have reprogrammed their history in their own mind. Because the reason why they are thankful for the trauma is because they wouldn't be who they are now. And people suddenly are able to see that all that contrast, all those bad things that happened to them in their lives, it actually were an excellent lesson or an excellent way to become who they are now. And they wouldn't be who they are now if it weren't for the things that they went through. So they basically don't want to change a thing about their history and about their past. And they're able to totally forgive every single person who ever did anything wrong to them. So it's really all about forgiveness and being able to let go of any of the emotional intensity behind anything that someone did to you in your past. When you can take your attention off the emotion and think about it without it giving you any kind of an emotional intensity, then you have totally forgiven somebody. And then you are free. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you feel like doing so, please leave a comment below and indicate to us or let us know, what do you think about this video? And also, how are you doing with your meditation, and how are you doing with your progress? And are you able to take your meditations into your actual life? Thank you for watching, and have a good day or night.